I'd like to call to order this regular meeting of the Ascension Parish Council on February the 7th. If you would please stand for the invocation and remain standing for the pledge. The invocation will be led by Mr. Martin McConnell.
Father in heaven, we thank you for the freedom that you give us to gather here today, and we gather in your name as we try to do what is best for your people, for your community, for our community, for all of us. Please give us the wisdom and the guidance that we need to do that work and the intelligence to do it fairly and equitably for everyone. This evening we ask you to remember, among all of our many brothers and sisters who are suffering, who have passed, especially remember Mr. Freddie Dufresne, an Ascension Parish businessman and resident. He's been a good friend to a lot of people for a lot of years. He has passed today. And we ask that you take him into your arms and take his family into your bosom and give them peace and comfort in this difficult time. And as always, we pray for our brothers and sisters in uniform, whether they be in faraway lands or right here at home. If they are out there putting their lives on the line for us, we ask that you protect them and bring them safely home to their families. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Councilman Johnson is absent this evening. He is ill. I think everyone else is present, so we will wish Benny good that he is quickly recovered. He has been to the doctor, I understand. Like most of us suffering from this plague of sinus right now, he's having to deal with that. And so there are no chairs additions at this time. Certainly there's a public sign-in period. If you have an item on the agenda about which you would like to speak, please sign in, let the secretary know, and you will have 3 minutes at the appropriate time to speak. At this time, I would like to welcome to Donaldsonville and to this meeting Mr. Rudy Gomez. He is with SSA Consultants, and Rudy and SSA did a community needs assessment for the west bank of this parish, and Rudy is here tonight to present the outcome of that needs assessment and to talk a little bit about the recommendations that they have as a result of that community needs assessment. So Rudy, I thank you personally for being here. I appreciate it in our beautiful old courthouse here in Donaldsonville. And we look forward to everything that you have to share with us tonight and with the community of the West Bank.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the opportunity to speak to the council tonight. It's my first trip into this courthouse. It is a beautiful old building. As the chair mentioned, SSA Consultants was engaged by Prevost Memorial Hospital late in 2017 to conduct a community needs assessment, which is something that hospitals, particularly rural hospitals, periodically do. Most hospitals do that periodically to find out what the community believes it needs and wants, and also to look at the data that's available about the geographic area to find out what the priority healthcare needs might be. And so we designed the assessment late in 2017 and conducted most of the work of that outreach assessment in the first quarter of 2018. We completed our work and delivered a report of findings and recommendations to the hospital board we finished it in April and delivered it in May to the hospital board. And we also delivered detailed copies, I think, to the then chair of the council, Mr. Dawson, and as well as to Mr. Joseph, who both represent districts, territory on the West Bank, and to the parish president, detailed copies. And so what I have to present to you today, and you have the one page in front, is a summary of a longer report, probably a 20-page report plus addendums, which was our final report to the hospital. But I'll take you through the methodology, the findings, and the recommendations. We did a number of things that we together made up this assessment. We did a number of individual interviews of community leaders in the public and private arena. We did a number of group presentations and input gathering sessions from groups on the West Bank. And this assessment was constrained to the West Bank of Ascension Parish. And we did that with the assistance of local groups like the Chamber and the Mayor's Office and the Council on Aging and others that helped and facilitated getting us into meet with groups. We developed a survey instrument that we created hard copies of and we could use when we went around and did these sessions and gather survey input from people. We also developed a new website for the hospital, and we put the community assessment page on that website and this instrument so that people online, if they wanted to, could complete the survey as well and give us their input about what they need and thought we needed and wanted on the West Bank in terms of healthcare services. Then we compiled all that information. We looked at some of the census data as well as the healthcare statistics provided by the Louisiana Department of Health to look at just some of the facts about rates of disease and those sorts of things and put that in the report as well and develop this report of findings and recommendations. We had 6 major findings that we cited in the report and 3 major recommendations. And I'll go through the findings first. And the first one is that the community recognizes a need for and values the presence of the hospital, Prevost Memorial, to serve the West Bank of Ascension Parish. And then usually that's the first question we always start with when we do these kinds of assessments, is do you really need a hospital here? Is that an important thing in this day and age with transportation and EMS and all that? Is that still something you really want and need? And we got a resounding yes from virtually everyone we talked to. And then the second part of that question, which I asked, was why? Why do you think that's so? And there were 2 themes that they said over and over again that we gathered. One was access convenience, that this is sort of the anchor healthcare resource in this part of the parish on the West Bank. And for minor and moderate injuries, emergencies, for outpatient diagnostics and routine follow-up care, if we don't have that hospital and its services here, then people are really going to be pressed to go other places for that sort of day in and day out type service, as well as medical stabilization. They recognize the ER serves as a place, even when people are critically injured or critically ill. Sometimes they can't make it to the big trauma centers or the big regional hospitals, and they have to stop off somewhere and be stabilized and put into a condition where they can be transported for more definitive care. And so they use those 2 reasons to sort of underpin that, yes, we definitely do need this hospital to be an anchor healthcare resource for the West Bank. The second finding is that we asked them if they supported the notion that the hospital continue to invest capital resources to expand and or improve and or renovate the facility there. And they said yes with a caveat. They said yes, assuming that those investments are designed to impact the priority healthcare needs that we have in the community, and that they want to make sure that money, in other words, was well spent on the needs and wants of the people of the West Bank. But again, a resounding yes to that ongoing capital investment in the Prevost facilities. The third finding, then we started asking them, what are those priority needs and wants? What are the things you think we most need and to either strengthen or add to the resources and services that are available on the West Bank? And they talked about any number of things, but the things we heard most often was wellness and preventive care, primary care and urgent care or after-hours care, in addition to an emergency room, but some after-hours clinic, urgent care clinic services. A lot of people talked about having specialty physicians and other practitioners maybe rotate through if they could do more of that. They thought that would be helpful and useful, including behavioral health services. And then finally, they talked about rehabilitation services, extended care, facility services, and hospice care, end-of-life type hospice care services on the West Bank as well. The fourth finding was talking to a lot of the community leaders that we talked to. They strongly encouraged the hospital to raise significantly its level of community engagement and community support, particularly in the areas of wellness, preventive care, public safety, and healthcare education. And what we heard over and over again from people was we need to see more of the hospital, a greater presence on the West Bank in terms of doing these services, these preventive services, educational services. And they talked about this in terms of partnering up with other resources in the community, to other local organizations, other local agencies, and sponsor things and co-sponsor things and co-host things and offer things and getting outside of the hospital. The hospital does a number of things every year in these services. They do the annual fair, and they do some education classes in the hospital. But what I heard from the leaders was we need them to get out more into the community and partner up with a lot of the organizations and agencies and sponsor some things focused on preventive care, on healthcare education, things of that nature. The fifth finding was that the community leaders recognized the benefits and the potential necessity of partnering with other healthcare organizations to sustain and expand Prevost Memorial Hospital's long-term ability to serve the West Bank community. There is a national trend that is getting stronger in the last couple of decades, and that is for physicians to be more and more in large groups, and for those large groups not to be owned by physicians, but to be owned by health systems and other groups. And today in this country, really for the first time ever, more than half of all the practicing physicians do not work in their own practices. They are part of larger systems, healthcare systems. And so it just tipped over the 50% mark, and that's 50 going to a much bigger number, we think, if those trends continue. And it's because of the nature of healthcare. It's gotten more complex, it's gotten more expensive, and bigger organizations can better cover that overhead and that complexity that's required to practice medicine in the modern way that we do today. And what that means, particularly in rural communities, where you have a tough time getting physicians anyway, and that's a long-standing issue in rural communities across the country, that it's going to be even tougher. Because the days of physicians locating in ones and twos and threes and having their own practices, that's rapidly fading. And the physicians and the physician's assistants and the nurse practitioners and all are more and more going to be attached to large organizations. So if you want to have providers in your community, more and more you're going to be looking at building relationships and collaborative agreements and partnerships and all with the organizations that actually have the providers in them. And there was a really, I thought, keen understanding of that by the community leaders that I talked to, really across the board, inside and outside of healthcare. The sixth finding was just the mention at the time, this was before the tax election, we felt compelled to say, oh, no, by the way, there's a tax election coming up, and depending on how that election goes, you might lose half your money that's coming from the tax, the sales tax, a half-penny sales tax. If that goes to a quarter-penny sales tax, that's obviously going to impact your revenue stream going forward. It may impact some of the capital plans you may be having and all, you may have to reconsider that. So we just wanted to make a point that that's going to create for a little point, at least for several months, again, this is back in May, some uncertainty about financing, and that's an important thing for you to think about. So those were the findings, the major findings of the assessment. And from that, we made 3 recommendations. One was to develop and implement a practical community engagement plan focused on health and healthcare education, public safety, wellness, and preventive care. And to really formalize and create a plan that has a budget and some goals and some objectives, so that it's not reactive and it's not just one thing here and one thing there, but really sort of put some planning into that, some contact with other groups, so that you have an annual plan or a 2-year or 3-year sort of plan as to what are you going to do and how are you going to reach out, and what things will you set as priorities. So that was the first thing that we recommended. The second was to investigate and pursue cooperative agreements and or collaborative relationships with healthcare provider organizations, and not just maybe one. You could maybe have a number of these relationships with different groups to do different things that offer the practitioners necessary to strengthen the long-term sustainability of Prevost Hospital's service to the West Bank community. And we think that's a long-term strategic imperative for the hospital. That's where the physicians are going to be in the future. That's where the physician extender and other medical professionals are mostly going to be, in these large provider groups and these large health systems. And so beginning to investigate and talk with them and figuring out how we can match up needs with resources is a conversation and an effort we think should begin now. And then finally, to finalize a capital investment and service expansion plan that is sustainable and reflective of the priority community needs that are in this study. Again, what I heard the community say is we support the idea of continuing to invest in this hospital, assuming that those investments fit with our priority needs and wants. And so this is literally just capturing that idea and saying there should be a plan, a capital plan, and an explanation of what we're going to do and to what end, what it's going to provide for the community. There should be some sort of pro forma that goes with that. And we also mentioned in the longer report that plan should be promoted in the community. It should be widely sold and promoted where the hospital can say, we heard you. We heard what you said. We're looking at our own assessment reports and we are developing future plans and future services and future upgrades to what we do, the services and the facilities here that are reflective of what we heard the community say. And so those are the 3. I mean, we could create a much longer list of more detailed things, but we prefer in this type of a project to do the big things and to point to what we think are the strategically most important things. And these 3 things sort of came to the surface in our project. Again, we delivered this to the board in May of 2018, and they received it in one of their official board meetings. I'd be glad to answer any questions that anyone may have.
Thank you, Rudy. I'm sure there will be. Mr. Dawson?
Thank you, Rudy. I was wondering, how was this received by the board? I guess the board commissioned you to do that. Was it well received? Did they say they were going to adhere to the recommendations? Or?
I met with the board individually to interview them during the assessment, and then I met with them as a group to present the report. They seemed to receive it very well. We spent probably 2.5 or 3 hours going through it and talking it through, and I thought it was received quite well from the board. I have not talked with them since, but I thought it was received quite well by the administration and by the board.
Also, in recommendations, the second recommendation that you have, which is to investigate, pursue cooperative endeavor agreements and/or collaborative relationships with other healthcare organizations. Can you give me an example of that?
Well, I mean, if you just look in this area, where are the big groups that have big groups of physicians and other providers? In South Louisiana, that's Ochsner, that's the Franciscan Missionaries of Our Lady, that's General Health, that's Women's Hospital, that's, I think if you go over toward Thibodeau, the Thibodeau Regional System as well, those are the ones that are in this.
So would that be fair to say it just would be someplace that had a bigger bench than what a local hospital would have? Is that correct?
No, exactly. It is, again, I think, and this is a long-term strategic sort of, I think, reality, that more and more physicians are in those big groups. And that's a trend we expect, just looking at the national data, looking at what's going on here locally and in Louisiana over the last 10, 15 years, we think that that's going to continue. And so if you want providers in your community, then you got to talk to the people who have the providers that are those organizations. And increasingly, that's going to be big groups. And we didn't recommend any particular ones to the hospital. And I think, again, at this early stage in that, you want to talk to everybody who will talk to you. You want to go find people to talk to. And even if they're not in this general area right now, if they're in Louisiana, you might be able to have them, have a productive conversation with them. And again, it's a strategic thing that I think those conversations should and could begin now, and you want them to be pretty open-ended. What can you do for us? What can we do for you? Because any of those sorts of relationships have to be mutually beneficial, or they won't last very long. And having those kinds of conversation, I think, would be useful with as many groups as you can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Mr. Satterley.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Rudy. I have a couple of logistics questions, and I don't know how the third one is kind of a curiosity cat question. And actually, now that Mr. Dawson spoke, let me do that first. I have a follow-up question. Under your second recommendation, is it the viewpoint of SSA then that under recommendation number 2 that the recommendation can be used as a means to something you said earlier in your presentation, rotate specialists, for example, through the
right.
hospital?
And that would be a good example of one potential thing, because again, specialists
because they can't afford to have to pay for, let's say,
right.
some sort of mental doctor, mental health doctor, I should say. It sounded
right.
like he was himself in trouble. But yet, if they partnered with maybe the Franciscan Ochsner group, whatever.
Sure.
Provided they could get some
sure. Cardiology, any sort of specialty where it would be difficult to locate those resources in a rural community.
Right.
Bigger groups could rotate through some of those resources. And that's why those conversations are important, to find out what makes sense, and because you probably have to have a lot of conversation, a lot of research.
So I take it they're currently not doing that, right?
I don't think at the moment you have any of that right now. I think there's been efforts over time.
But under findings, they're asking for it. So if they're asking for it, this is just one way to solve to choke the dog on butter, to solve the problem. And it's
think.
an excellent way in my mind.
No, I just think that it's going to be an imperative
Right.
going forward, not just for Prevost Memorial, but for literally every rural healthcare, hospital and complex anywhere. That's going to be a challenge for them to find physicians and other providers that will work in their community, and the more broadly you can have conversations with groups that could maybe fill some of those needs, the better. And the hospital's in a good position in that it has some resources, some capital resources that it can invest to build facilities and provide, equipment and technology that would be necessary to locate new services in the area.
So logistically, so I can get my arms around the work that you guys did, SSA did, this methodology, when you talk about the survey instrument, what was your sample size? In other words, your response end number to the group presentations, input sessions, your meetings with these community leaders, et cetera. Is it a big, healthy, robust number, or is it a matter of the numbers I can count on my two hands, or?
Oh no, it was in the hundreds.
In the hundreds?
Oh, sure. Yeah,
good.
I don't know the exact number, but it's in the larger report.
Okay.
We did have a survey
And
in one of the addendums of the report. We have
And in talking to these 100-plus individuals, did y'all specifically ask the respondents, had they ever used the services of Prevost Hospital?
Again, I don't remember off the top of my head.
I don't have the survey instrument with me, I wouldn't be asking you, but
Right.
seems like that would be a logical question, because you want to be talking to a group that has had good or bad or indifferent, whatever, experiences versus and that's my third question, the curiosity cap.
We did have those conversations with a lot of the people we interviewed and talked to, and in person. I can't remember exactly on the survey what we did
and
there.
similar to that, considering your number 4 finding, which I won't read, but you can take a look at. Did your survey respondents know how Prevost was at the time being funded, or did you actually have to educate them in that regard?
I'm sorry?
Did you have to educate them in that regard? In other words,
Did
they understand the funding mechanism, that there was a sales tax, for example, that funds them, and that there was some talk about maybe redirecting that money towards recreation? They understood this?
The community leaders?
I'm sure the leaders did.
Yeah, they did.
How about the groups and so forth?
I think mostly yes, and we did talk about that because
So if they didn't and you educated them, what would be their feeling then? We want the hospital to keep the money, we want the education, we want the recreation, or what?
Well, I didn't ask people directly that, and I didn't want what we did to be promotional to the hospital. I didn't want it to feel like I'm marketing the hospital, or I'm trying to get people to vote a certain way. So we're pretty careful.
That's right.
About,
you did a survey before the actual vote.
Right. We didn't want this to be a promotional campaign to try and get people to vote a certain way. We wanted it to be an assessment to find out what they thought.
Nonetheless, they would have reacted if you had to educate them, not the community leaders, but them, meaning maybe group people you met with. They must have had some druthers.
Sure.
Some druthers about, we need a hospital first, or we got to.
No, both in the survey and in the in-person individual interviews and in the group sessions, the support for the hospital and continued investment in the hospital, both of those were very, very strong.
Okay, that's all
almost universal. But there was but we need to be spending that money and developing and resourcing things that sort of fit our priority needs. But with that caveat, it was fairly universal in terms of support.
I got you. I have no further questions, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other questions on this side, gentlemen? Mr. Waller?
I have a brief question. I've talked to Robin Delaney, my school board member, quite often about transportation issues, non-emergency transportation. It doesn't do much people on the west side of things very good if they can't get to the hospital.
Right.
Has there been any talk or discussion about the hospital funding non-emergency transportation to help people get to and from appointments if they need that?
I don't know if they has or not. I know that in talking with people, certainly the hospital realizes the challenge of transportation for some people, but I don't know if the hospital's ever had any serious conversation or research into the viability of them getting into non-emergency transport or not. I really don't know.
I think it's something that they really need to investigate, because it also can be, in the long term, a cost saver. If you have people calling an ambulance just to get to the hospital, which is not an uncommon occurrence.
Right.
Yeah, that costs a tremendous amount of money, and generally that goes back to the taxpayer.
Sure.
One way or another. So in future communications, I'd like to see Prevost explore non-emergency transportation for the citizens of the west side. So we have a lot of people that don't have a vehicle.
Sure. Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Any
sir.
other questions? Rudy, I thank you very much for your
Thank
very thorough
y'all
report.
very much. I appreciate it.
I think it's very helpful to the citizens of Donaldsonville to know what the
Good deal. Thank you.
outcome was. Thank you much. Have a safe trip home.
Thank you.
Item number 6, the parish president's report.
Just to touch on a few things about Prevost Hospital, and Mr. Aaron brought up about transportation. On both sides of the river, your senior citizens transport all senior citizens to doctor's appointments or whatever, but only senior citizens. And they also have vans for paraplegics or people in wheelchairs, so that's a good part of it. I don't know if there's an actual need beyond that, but I think it's in that report, which I do have the report in my office if anyone would like a copy or just to look at it. I have it. Also, we had a meeting with Prevost Hospital to talk about everybody knows about the opioid epidemic, and of course it's beyond opioids, it's a lot of stuff. And so we had a meeting about what we could possibly, there's a big need in Ascension Parish for some type of detox facility for our people. There's none in Ascension Parish. So we had this meeting with the judges and the DA's office and a lot of people in mental health, because we talked about people in prison on mental health and mostly drugs, and so everybody was looking at what we can do to help rehabilitate some of these people. So we found out that, if they're in jail and then it takes a long time to get them somewhere, and they detoxing in jail, not a pretty sight and stuff like that. But anyway, we had a good talk with Mr. Catawba, who was talking about they're looking to do some different things with the hospital, and we asked him if we could turn some of those rooms, 10, 12 rooms, into a detox facility. So I tasked Miss Suzanne Hamilton to talk with the state about permitting and stuff, because we don't know if you can do that in the same building. We do know it has to be secured and all that. So we're looking at all of those things. We're about ready to come to another meeting with some information for him to talk about doing that. So that's just some food for thought on Prevost. He's very open to things for the community, and he has some money and mental health has some money, so we was hoping we could work together with that, which would be a win-win for the whole parish. Right now we have, we changed insurance companies, and we have Humana, and we have biometric screening going on for our employees, and it's really a real good thing. We had a guy who was about to have a stroke today. His pressure was so high and everything, and they sent him home, and he's going to his doctor and stuff like that. It's a real good thing that a lot of the employees never go to the doctor unless they're sick, and so they don't know these things. But to let you know, Saturday's the last day that the parish is doing it at Lamar Dixon from 8 to 12. Anyone that's on the parish insurance, or your spouses, if they're on it, they can go do this from 8 to 12. And besides the screening, then there's a program called Go 65, and you can hook it up with your phone and get a lot of information on it. After Saturday, they can go to their own doctor to do the blood tests and different things that's required, but they have to pay, you have to pay yourself. So it's a good program. It's done by Oshners. Humana contracted Oshners to do this, and it's at our the banquet room facilities on the second floor at Lamar Dixon. So if any of y'all on that insurance, you can go Saturday or you can go to your own doctor. Thank you. If you need more information, just call the Human Resource Office. Thanks. That's all I got.
Any questions of the President?
I got a
Mr.
quick
Kluot.
question. How's Don Heisel doing?
Mr. Heisel's doing really good, and he's a trooper, and he's going to have a scan on the 14th. He's doing real good. Thank you.
Item number 7, the council committee reports. It is my desire tonight and in future meetings and I think we'll do it each time on the West Bank, that the council chairman will report on the activities of their committee, just some general information about what they're working on so that folks can be aware and so that we can all hold each other accountable, keep each other on task. And so tonight there will be reports from Mr. Bill Dawson, who's the chair of the Finance Committee, Aaron Lawler, who's the chair of the Transportation Committee, Councilman Satterley, who's the chair of the Utilities Committee, Chairman Oliver Joseph, chairman of the Strategic Planning Committee, and Mr. Cagnolotti, who's the chair of the Personnel Committee. In that order, gentlemen. Mr. Dawson.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. The report is, hopefully I'll be brief, that, we tried to establish some goals for the Finance Committee, and I've worked with Gwen and Dawn and Jacob Wagerspack, and what we're trying to accomplish here is to give a better presentation of both the financial and performance data to the council so that perhaps we could get a dashboard or a snapshot type thing that would tell us for a general idea how we're doing as a government. Some of the ideas that we have would be number of work orders that we have, new versus completed, the average age of work orders, how many building permits we've issued in the last month, compare that to the previous month and year over year, total employees that we have by department, total salaries we have by department versus what we had previous month and a year ago. Some general financial data like profit and loss sheets for the enterprise units, Lamar Dixon, ACUD1, ACUD2, PUA, and reports on these special revenue funds, especially the ones that are non-dedicated, like sales and tax use district number 1, East Ascension drainage, sales and tax district number 2, the road and bridge fund. Just pick out these major special revenue funds to see how we're doing there versus budget. Capital projects, pick a few of these major ones out and do a dashboard type presentation on that. EA major construction, courthouse, road projects, and move Ascension. And then under the operating budget have generally something from the general administration, the building department, total general fund. But hopefully I can make this smaller than what it is so it can truly be a one-page document that we can look at and give to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lawler.
Thank you. Transportation. One of the things that we've been moving forward on is Move Ascension projects. Many of those projects are moving forward with the right-of-way acquisition. Once again, I encourage all of our citizens that are impacted by right-of-way acquisition to please work with our representatives. The quicker we can get this done, the quicker we can make the road improvements that we desperately need. Right-of-way acquisition is always something that slows us down. When one or two people just don't want to sell, we really need that help. So please I'm asking the public to work with us on that. We're also working on traffic calming ideas. What this is many times we get requests from citizens to put a stop sign because people are speeding. Engineering-wise, that's not a legitimate base for putting in a stop sign. I've learned this the hard way. But there are ways to help neighborhoods with speeding, and that's called traffic calming. So our transportation department is putting together some ideas to bring to us on how we can do it in both existing neighborhoods and new subdivisions to ensure that we don't have this that problem going forward in the future. The transportation department is also working to create a maintenance formula to apply to new subdivision roads pursuant to the infrastructure districts that corresponds with the infrastructure districts that were recently passed, and now we're going to put together a formula on how we can apply this to a per mile of road. Lastly, I'd like to get started working on an evaluation process for all of the Move Ascension engineering firms to look at a way to quantify the quality of the work that's being done, the timeliness of the work, and the accountability. The ultimate goal is to lead to objective selection process for future projects that takes into account the specialty of the firms and the uniqueness of each project, but still gives us an objective basis for selecting the very best engineering firms for these projects. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Utilities, Mr. Sadler.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. We haven't met yet in 2019 in utilities, and as people know, the new chair, so not a lot's happened, but we do have a meeting coming up next Tuesday, I guess it is, and several topics will be discussed then. We're going to be taking a look at the design of the Oak Grove sewer plant in terms of potential amendment there with the contract that currently exists with Hartman Engineering. I think Councilman Joseph, who's on the committee with myself, will be, along with our IDD infrastructure expert, Parish department head, Mr. William Daniel, we're going to discuss the Donaldsonville proposed water rates. Also on our agenda, we will be talking a lot about the fourth quarter PUA dashboard. We have a report on that from Mr. Daniel, as well as our typical, which is a monthly event on utilities for those who may not be aware, what we call a leak repair report. We have had in the past and continue to have some problems with wasted water. We're trying to get a handle on where that water is going and how we obviously can correct it. For those who don't know, we now have some assistance in terms of grant money, as well as with that grant monies we can borrow at a real good rate, so that we can upgrade our water meters, put new pipes in the ground where there's a need for that, as well as work some with the fire hydrant situation. We'll also have a PUA/ACUD #1 report on water consumption, as well as specific to just the PUA. We're undergoing on a monthly basis in the Utilities Committee what is called, and for this month that will be a November monthly audit report, as well as year to date. That's something that's standard in the committee and is done all the time. You will notice, Madam Chairwoman and fellow colleagues, that there is no sewer right now, although the committee is doing a lot in that arena, particularly as it relates to what I would call the Highway 2230 Hillaryville-Darrow sewer situation. I won't go into a lot of specifics on that, but that project is well under its way in terms of funding and different things that's going on there. What we don't have, of course, is still a plan either up in the Prairieville area or what we used to call the modified P16 sewer area, or even for that matter, a parish-wide sewer system. But I pledge tonight, Councilwoman Casso, that we are going to be permeating our discussions going forward. This will be the last month. Like I said, we didn't meet in January, but this in February, where you won't see sewer in the north part of Ascension Parish on an agenda talking about how we can revisit that topic. I need not tell anyone, like a blushing bride, we've been brought to the altar more than once, not just with a potential regional system, the modified P16 as it's known to most people, but on a public-private partnership with the Ascension environmental effort. It is my distinct plan not to let us go to the altar a third time. And I'm looking forward to working with some new members of the committee, and at that point, I'll welcome them tonight. I guess that's Mr. Lawler and Mr. Dawson. OJ and Mr. Benny Johnson has served with me before in the committee, not with me as a leadership role, but under the guidance of Councilman Johnson and also Mr. Plula. We're going to have sewer. Believe me. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're welcome. Thank you. All right. And next, strategic planning, Mr. Joseph.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman. On goals for strategic planning is pretty much the master land use plan. Basically, just trying to get all departments and all the fire department, the sheriff department, and the school board to make sure we can get our land use plan together and communicate with administration, planning and zoning. We know we're going to have a lot of ordinance that comes up and changes, and so our goal is to concentrate on that and be successful to provide the clear and direct information to the public so we could get that master land use plan ready and to go for the future for Ascension Parish.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Appreciate that. Personnel Committee, Mr. Cagliari.
Thank you, Madam Chair. February 5th, turn that on. On February 5th, Personnel Committee met to review applications and interview applicants for boards and commissions where vacancies are to be filled. Applications were reviewed and interviews conducted. I will request an agenda item to present the recommendations of the Personnel Committee to the full council at the next council meeting on February 21st. I want to thank the Personnel Committee members, Vice Chairman Todd Lambert, and members Travis Turner, Oliver Joseph, and Benny Johnson for their commitment to serve. Item 2, the Personnel Committee will hold a special meeting to discuss items for consideration moving forward, as the committee will have additional duties and responsibilities. Item 3, I've had discussions with the administration and legal counsel to begin the process to organize and fill positions for an Ascension Parish Animal Control Board. I will report on the progress of this task next month. And finally, I want to take a minute to thank and recognize the Council Secretary, Cinnamon and Jessica, for their hard work taking care of public notices for board and commission vacancies, scheduling our meetings and interviews, and providing the information we need to conduct our business. Thank you for what you do. That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
Thank you, sir. So the members of the public are now aware, these are the gentlemen who are responsible for the committees, and we will be reporting regularly, and we will all be accountable, because when we say we're going to do it, and we say it in public that we're going to do it, then guess what? We got to get it done. So I am proud of each of them. I look forward to working with them, and look forward to their monthly reports. They don't need to be, I'm not going to ask you gentlemen to report on everything that happened in your committee. That would be redundant. People are watching that on television. But we do need to talk about what our major initiatives are and how much progress we've made toward them. Thank you so much. The consent agenda, item number 8. A is adoption of a January 3rd, 2019 regular council meeting minutes. B is adoption of the January 17th, 2019 regular council meeting minutes.
So moved, Madam Chairman.
Have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Motion by Councilman Satterley, a second by Councilman Lawler. Are there any questions? Does anyone desire to remove anything from here, by the way? I didn't think anybody did. But so hearing note that no one wants to do that, we have a motion and a second. Are there any questions about any of this? Any objections to it? Hearing none, consent agenda is approved. Item number 9, under general business. Approval of a memorandum of understanding by and between Ascension Parish Government and the Ascension Council on Aging to provide for a cost-sharing agreement for the development of a wellness facility on the east bank of Ascension Parish. Mr. Parrington.
Yes. My understanding is in the health fund, there's already been budgeted $600,000 for this, and COA has budgeted $200,000, and we just need an agreement for them to go forward and begin the architectural work.
So moved.
I have a motion by Councilman Kluwat, a second by Councilman Joseph. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 10, for the year 2019-2020, Keep Louisiana Beautiful Health Communities Grant. Approval to submit application and to authorize Parish President Kenny Matassa to sign and execute all documents, and/or Ms. Gwen LeBlanc, the CFO, for financial documents. Ms. Martha?
Move to approve.
Have a motion by Councilman Lawler, a second by Kluwat. Any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes.
Thank you.
Good job, Martha.
Good job, Martha. Thank you so much. Item number 11, a proposed ordinance to impose a temporary restriction on the placement of fill for major and minor subdivisions in all unincorporated areas of the Ascension Parish not designated as Zone X by the most recent FEMA flood maps for Ascension Parish. Councilman Lawler.
This is something that I asked to be put on the agenda. We are in the process of determining the level of fill that is acceptable to be used throughout our parish. Currently, the LSU Coastal Sustainability Studio is conducting more research on this issue, and they're supposed to come back to us in May, I believe, but possibly sooner, with levels of recommended fill for the parish. In the meantime, we continue to allow fill to pile up in areas that may be essential drainage ways. This is permanently clogging our parish. I mean, there's no two ways about it. If you start piling up dirt in areas that water is supposed to drain through, it prevents it from draining as quickly, and it backs up and creates problems. We need to be willing to move forward with some sort of temporary moratorium until we decide what is best. Because at this point, we're talking about a 6-month delay at most. This is something that we're looking at future generations. Once we put this dirt down, it's going to affect future generations. And if people don't understand the importance of a temporary ban, water has to go somewhere. If you think of areas like a bathtub, and all of our parish drains differently, but if you think of it like a bathtub and you have a drain, if that bathtub starts to fill up with water and you've got a drain and water's coming out of it, and you start to put fill in that drain, well, it slows down the water from coming out. And if you start putting fill in that bathtub, it raises the level of water inside that tub, inside that drainage basin. And what's happening is, it's not a tremendous amount, and in 6 months, we're not going to have a tremendous amount of fill going in there. But every inch counts. And I say this because in August of 2016, I had neighbors, and I'm not going to use their names, their initials are D and K, and they moved here about 10 years ago after Hurricane Katrina, after flooding their house. And during the 2016 flood, their house literally did not flood by the width of my thumb. I walked down to their house, put my thumb there, it was the width of my thumb. Now, adding fill in the drainage areas can affect that. What we're talking about is inches. Fill is not going to affect a house that flooded 8 or 9 feet of water, even 3 or 4 feet of water. But we have, I don't know how many people, but we have many people in our parish that avoided flooding by mere inches. And that's what we're talking about here, protecting the people on everyday floods that could have flooded by mere inches, and we can't say, hey, let's hold up on this for 6 months until we know what the best thing is for our area. I mean, to me, that's very irresponsible. Let us not wait 6 months to make this decision. Let's hold up now, and what we'll find out is some areas you can use fill in and it's safe to do it, and people can go on building there using fill. Some areas we're going to find out you shouldn't use fill in. And in those areas, if we're still using fill now, we can't go back and take it out. A house is going to be built there. So I also want to dispel some myths or talking points on this. People say that it's going to prevent people from using their land if we have a temporary moratorium on fill, or even a permanent ban on certain fill in certain areas. I tell you, this is just not true. People can still build, they can still sell their land, they can build in Acadian-style homes on pier and beam, just as our forefathers did. You know, if you look at Louisiana, you look at the older homes, They are built up on pier and beam piling because they understood. Now, it's amazing, pier and beam is the future, but it's also the past, and it's amazing that we haven't learned from that. So don't tell me that people won't be able to use their lands. People will be able to use their land and build up. And if you look at cities like Madisonville and Mandeville and most of Orleans Parish, all these shotgun houses in Orleans Parish are built up. They're on cinder blocks and pier and beam piling, and it's worked for hundreds of years. Another argument is, it comes from the developers who tell us that no one will buy a raised home. And I tell you, that's a bunch of bull. Because people are building raised homes in Ascension Parish and all over South Louisiana, and people are buying them, and people are building them of their own volition because they want them. A raised home is a beautiful home with a nice front porch and everything that I would really love to have. And I'll tell you another thing. The argument fails because years ago, these same developers came to us and said, if you put traffic impact fees on our developments, it's going to kill the market. Nobody's going to buy a house, and there won't be any building. And I tell you what, they cried wolf because it didn't slow down. We continue to build. So to hear that argument again, I just heard it a couple weeks ago, people talking about the infrastructure districts, that it's going to kill development. Well, you know what? It doesn't happen. It's a scare tactic. And we have to be willing to take a stand. This should not be delayed. This should be able to go forward with a simple 6-month moratorium. And it won't even last that long, quite honestly, because the key is that once this comes back, once this LSU report comes back, we'll be ready to vote on it. We'll stop delaying, and we'll be ready to vote on how much fill is acceptable in this parish. And I've said it all along, it's not an engineering decision, it's a political decision. The engineering says you don't put fill in a floodplain, simple as that. And I understand that that's not acceptable everywhere. So for the time being, let's stop putting fill where we don't know whether it's safe or not. And I would ask that this council move forward with an actionable item to the full council that we have a 6-month moratorium, just like it's written. And in the meantime, if we want to send something to strategic planning and have strategic planning also work on a floodplain management plan, that'd be fantastic. But there's no reason to delay a temporary moratorium. It confounds me constantly to think that we just want to say, hey, just keep building. We don't know if it's safe. We don't know if it's not safe, but just keep building because we can't go back on it. That's all I have. Thank you all.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe call Mr. Enlow up if you could. Mike? Mike, a couple months back, I thought we had us a flood plan coming to the drainage board to move forward with, and it got passed on. And I thought it was ready to, they already had it laid out on how much fill was going to be allowed. And all of a sudden we passed on it, and now we got LSU doing a study. We already had a study, and it was completed. Why we didn't move forward then is my question, I guess. Well, I don't know who.
Yeah, I wish I could answer that.
I could answer that for me, but
We have Jerome in the back.
Mr. Jerome might be able to.
Sorry. Good evening.
You can't help me?
His eyes look like saucers.
Yeah, sorry.
I'm not scared.
Because I was ready to move forward, and all of a sudden it got passed on. And we had a report, we had a study, it was in front of us for an amount of 3 foot of fill. And then all of a sudden it got passed on, and now we got LSU doing a study and it's getting prolonged and prolonged.
Well, my understanding is that the work that HNTB did on this was basically a modification of our ordinance to, look at fill, look at modifying other portions of the ordinance to get everything in line, and get everything consistent with the fill portion of it, all right? And at the time, they were going to eliminate the use of fill, right? That was one of the proposals that was going forward, and then that was pulled back. And then we asked them to, let's say, okay, let's come back and look at we're going to leave the fill issue alone, and then based on the modification of the new FEMA maps, the firm maps that cover the Conway Basin, we wanted to modify the code in order to get everything in line. So that's the second item that was before the board, and that's the thing that's going to be coming before you. I think it's next week, or I'm sorry, the next meeting is just a cleanup of that ordinance. So those were the two items that I understood there to be with H&TB. Just to give you an update on the LSU study, we met with them yesterday. We had some civil engineering students coming to the parish. We met with them in the conference room and then went out to the site, looked at properties that had fill. And we also gave a presentation, Senior Planner Eric Poche and I, at the Goodwood Library today for the entire study. And this is kind of a regional approach. East Baton Rouge is looking at this, Livingston is looking at it, and so are we, all right? So that's kind of the focus of that.
But I guess the big thing, if we wouldn't have passed on it then, a few months back, we wouldn't be putting a moratorium on for 6 months of a total shutdown of any field.
Right.
Even a home on a piece of property that is not in, they're gonna actually all build up a little bit, We gotta have some kind of field on properties.
Yeah. Well, remember that
you don't want to build your house flat in Louisiana, in Ascension Parish. Flat on the ground. I don't care what part of the parish you're in, you do not want to build it flat on the ground. You want to put some kind of fill on it.
Right. Well, remember that fill is being used to meet our base floodplain elevation requirements, which is 1 foot over BFE.
That's
right?
correct.
So you can either use fill or you can use pier and beam in order to accomplish that task.
Right.
Right. So.
Any other questions? I think Mr. Dawson has a question.
Necessarily a question for Jerome, but I have some comments on the proposition. So, and first let me say that the concept of this, I'm in favor of it, very much in favor of it. And, I was part of the group that wanted to put it on the agenda tonight. However, when I started looking at this, and I did, maybe 15 or 20 minutes worth of research, I came up with several questions. For example, the relief here is based on preliminary plat, so it doesn't, what it says is you can't, we won't accept the submission of the preliminary plat. But when you go back and you look at the regulations and you look at state law, if somebody has an application in and a 60-day clock starts ticking on that, and you have to approve or deny, or the application is approved. So I think the point of relief is incorrect. Or at least that's a question that I have. It also states in here that it only applies to major and minor subdivisions. So I went back and looked at the Land Development Code, and we have plenty other land uses besides that. For example, we have simple subdivisions, 9 lots or less. We have family partitions. We have individual lots. We have land use I. So, we're going to, as far as I'm concerned, we're going to provide exclusions for these other land uses. So we're going to pick out these 2 land uses and provide exclusions for these other, I would say about 4 or 5 of them. And again, doing just some brief research on that, and I found a, pertinent memo by Hardy, Carey, and Chauvin. This is a law firm out of Mandeville. And one of the things that they recommend there is that you shouldn't have exclusions. That, if you discriminate in one way or another, then you have a possibility of this not being upheld. So I think it's a major step that we're about to take, and I appreciate Aaron's work on it. I do think that, our normal process includes going to a committee, and that this is vetted through a committee. So I'm going to make a motion that we refer this to strategic planning, and that give them an opportunity to vet it. I don't think it'll take a tremendous amount of time. We didn't have this as an action item tonight, so strategic planning, they meet next week. They could come back to us for the second meeting this month with a recommendation of any changes. Additionally, I'd like to ask that I would add to that strategic planning look at this floodplain management, the limit on floodplain management fill. And I'm in agreement with Councilman Todd Lambert that, I think that those recommendations are ready from HNTB, have strategic planning, that committee, bring HNTB in, let them present those entire findings, and bring that to us at the next meeting if that's possible. And let's get this thing up here and let's vote on it, and let's go on to something else. So I have a motion to refer that with those caveats to strategic planning.
So I have a motion by Mr. Dawson and a second by Mr. Dempsey Lambert to refer this item with further action on the floodplain management issue to strategic planning for a prompt
Review and vetting along with,
and a return to this body with recommendations.
correct.
Mr. Joseph, you got that? Yes.
And look, I'd like to also thank, look, this has been.
We're gonna have to vote on
Okay,
this. So I have a motion and a second. Are there any other questions or comments? Now, Mr. Lambert.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to thank Jerome, staff. This has been a long process, and just like Mr. Dawson mentioned, there's been a lot of questions. And look, folks, when you start dealing with people's property, it all started back with the courthouse. There's a lot of things in this that needs to be vetted out. We need to talk about it. It's going to affect a lot of districts. Some of our districts will not be affected at all. It's just a beast here that we have to deal with. It's coming to an end, and I hope it comes to an end very soon. But you're affecting lives and property. I think we need to look at this, and I don't think what we've had here 6-8 months dealing with this is turning and breaking arms here. I think it's going to be well vetted, and we'll have something good at the end. Thank you.
Any other comments? Mr. Lawler?
I guess I don't have to make my amendment to include all properties that I had prepared. But so I won't do that. If I understand correctly, though, this will not delay this because we do have strategic planning scheduled for next week. So this will not result in a delay. As long as it doesn't result in a delay, I have no problem with this. Thank you all.
Mr. Kulak?
It's good.
I just, I'm just telling y'all that this is serious. We wanted to put this to bed a while back. I don't feel like the engineering firms have came out with the best information possible at times, and we depend on our administration and everybody and our consulting firms to come back to us. I don't like the delay. I would almost be in favor of moving this tonight. I'm gonna tell you right now. But we do need to make sure that it's across the board. Every ordinance that has to do with development over the years, we have several people here that sat on in our planning and zoning commission and on different things, that there's some way for somebody can do something and you go down the street and somebody else can't do it. Okay? We need to hand this out across the board and look to our constituents and not necessarily the people that are going to make big money, the people that plan on living here. And I'm ready.
Mr. Satterley?
Yes, Madam Chairwoman, I rise in support of Mr. Lawler's original intention, and if it's kosher to do so, I also rise in support of Mr. Dawson's suggested amendment. It sounds like that's where this discussion's headed anyway. I just want to point this out as well, and I agree with Mr. Kluak and Mr. Dempsey Lambert. We need to have done this yesterday, so I'm not object to one more bite at the apple at the SPC level. I don't chair that anymore, and good luck with that, OJ. And coming back, if I understand this correctly, to this body to do something, but not sooner than later, about maybe the next meeting or however this is going to go down. I do have concern, as Mr. Dawson said, about that language where it says no preliminary plat may be accepted for submission or approval, where it says any major minor subdivision. Mr. Lambert mentioned a moment ago the courtroom. That's not a major and minor subdivision. So how does that fall under this particular thing? So I think it can be tweaked. I'm confident that under Mr. Joseph's newly found leadership in SBC, that as well as the other objection Mr. Dawson raised, and who knows, there may be, if he says he's only looked at it for 20 minutes, there may be even others, and I really haven't looked at it myself. Maybe I'll have some myself. I'm still on that committee. So again, It's not going to get by me one way or another, but please, let's be sincere with ourselves and with the public. It's been a long time since the great flood of 2016. That's August, a couple of years ago. On this August, I guess it's 3 years. Is that correct? And I keep reminding myself, I'd like to remind everybody else of what Garrett Graves said in front of us. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when we're going to have a flood again. I agree with Mr. Lawler, need to put another inch anywhere where we don't need to be putting it. We're going to have to saddle up. We're going to have to do something. I'll support one more time. Almost like Randy, I'd like to go ahead and do something tonight, but I'll be patient. But let's get this done in strategic planning, bring it back, and say this is how it's going to be. Thank you for listening.
You're welcome. Mr. Gluck.
Yeah, I just want to, based on the respect of all the people here on this council, is that we'll and I'm looking at Mr. Joseph, who's the new head of that committee, that we're moving this to a committee next week. Are y'all sitting with bated breath and anticipating that we have a committee meeting to come out with a finalization on that then? Okay? If we are, if that is the intent of this council, it's going to end up back in front of this council. I suggest that you get with legal and we have something drafted to present at that committee to where we don't rehash, try to reinvent the wheel, all right? Because, that conversation is in front of us tonight, and it's good to be in front of all of us, and it's going to end up back in front of us. We had a couple caveats that we named tonight that's going to go within that, and just reading the board right here, I see when it comes back to the council, that's probably going to pass, okay? If in anticipation of the right words. So I'm going to ask that the administration and whomever that give Mr. Joseph all the help that they can within this short time to go back and present something good at the Strategic Planning Committee.
Thank you. My charge will be that Mr. Joseph get with Melissa from HNTB and Mr. Jerome Fournier from our planning department, and have, with the blessing certainly of the parish president, and have them there so that the decisions you make are decisions based on both sound engineering principles, planning principles, and certainly we need the input of legal for fairness. And we will go from there. Any other discussion that needs to be had? Mr. Joseph.
Yes, Madam Chair. I appreciate everyone scheduling, making my committee meeting dates and telling me when I'm going to have them and everything. But we did move the original date to the February the 27th. So instead of that, I'm going to try to accommodate and say I'm going to have my meeting on the 19th before the regular meeting, okay, because I already had canceled it once and moved it back. I'm going to request to change my committee meeting to February the 19th, and that give us time to do it. And on February the 21st, we have a regular meeting. So it would be ready for that committee. Hopefully, if we get everything squared away with legal and planning and zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. We appreciate that, and we are sorry. The chair apologizes for any
this
inference that you should have your meeting on a specific date. I thank you very much.
I left a job last year.
Mr. Dawson, did you have a further comment?
No, I want to make sure you got that.
So we have a motion and a second. We have had all the discussion I think we need to have. I'm grateful to all of you gentlemen for that. Are there any objections to the motion? Hearing none, that motion passes. In the public hearing ordinance section, item number 12, a reading of an ordinance, the budget amendment number 1, to amend the 2019 budget. Mr. Parrington.
An ordinance to amend ordinance adopting and appropriating 2019 operating and capital budgets of the Parish of Ascension adopted by Ascension Parish Council on 15th day of November 2018. Section 1, the Ascension Parish Council hereby ordains that the ordinance approving, adopting, and appropriating the 2019 operating and capital budget for the Parish of Ascension is hereby amended, approved, and appropriated as follows. Operating budget, enterprise, internal service funds, parish utilities of Ascension, revenues transfer in from wastewater construction fund 2.5 million, expenditures, engineering fees, GSA contract for drinking water infrastructure improvement project $2.5 million. Capital budget, wastewater construction fund expenditures transfer out of parish utilities $2.5 million. This ordinance has been submitted to a vote. The vote thereon was as follows.
Open public comment.
I have a motion to open and a second to open the public comment.
Motion to close.
I have a motion and a second to close public comment.
Move the ordinance.
Have a motion to move the ordinance by Mr. Satterley. Second by Mr. Dawson. Mr. Lambert.
Yeah, Mr. Kenny, you might be able to, what is this pertaining to, 2.5 million? Which one? This public hearing. Transfer, so wastewater
Item 12.
construction fund, it's a $2.5 million, I guess, for,
The drinking water, that was, y'all already have approved that program.
and what is it, what is it doing for us?
Well, it's for handling the Donsville project for the water company. And it's not just GSA, there's other companies involved.
But just engineering fees is 2.5 million?
William's not here tonight, but I presume so, but it's not just GSA, it's several companies doing different things,
Well, yeah, and
you know.
it's all engineering fees. How much is the total?
Oh, the
budget?
total project?
Yeah,
Well, we have $17 million worth of work.
2.5 million of the engineering fees.
Correct.
Mr. Lawler.
Did this go out for RFQ?
Do what?
Did we send this out for RFQ? I wasn't on utilities at the time, though. I thought it was a $250,000 when it got to utilities, though.
William,
Yes, but I mean, I thought when it got to utilities, it was $250,000.
it's a $17 million project.
But when it got to utilities, I thought it was at $250,000.
No.
It was 2.5 million there? I mean, did this go out for RFQ though?
No, didn't go out, as my understanding, didn't go out for RFQ, that they had a contract and they put it under this contract. And this is,
Correct.
this is a part of the, part of the grant money that we're looking to, whatever we applied and got approved for.
Okay, so this is a budget amendment that we're voting on. I think what we are back.
It's not the contract right, I'm sorry.
This is a motion to move the money from one fund to the other, as I understand it, or to amend the budget. So I think if there are any other questions about this particular project, those need to be directed to William as soon as possible. I do recall myself voting on this, so I know that we have indeed done that. And I think perhaps we just have some leftover questions. So if you have those, please direct those to William tomorrow. Any other questions? I have a motion and a second. Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 15, reading of an ordinance to direct the levy and collection of an ad valorem tax of 1 mil on the dollar of assessed valuation of all property subject to taxation within the geographic boundaries of the Parish of Ascension, State of Louisiana, for a period of 10 years, beginning with the year 2019 and ending with the year 2028, for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, improving, maintaining, and operating an animal shelter for the parish, including necessary equipment and facilities therefore. Mr. Parrington.
Mr. Dugas, the bond counsel.
Mr. Dugas. Welcome, Malcolm. Good to see you this evening.
Nice to be here. Good evening. The following ordinance is presented to the council for its consideration. An ordinance directing and levying and collection of an ad valorem tax of 1 mil on the dollar of assessed valuation of all properties subject to taxation within the geographic boundaries of the Parish of Ascension, State of Louisiana, for a period of 10 years, beginning with the year 2019 and ending with the year 2028, for the purpose of acquiring, constructing, improving, maintaining, and operating an animal shelter for the parish, including necessary equipment and facilities therefore.
Thank you.
Motion.
I have a motion by Mr. Satterley
Excuse me, open a public comment.
to open the public hearing. Second by Mr. Cagnolotti.
Motion to close.
I have a motion by Mr. Satterley to close the public hearing, second by Mr. Dempsey Lambert.
Move the ordinance.
I have a motion by Mr. Satterley to move the ordinance, second by Mr. Travis Turner. Are there any questions? You didn't know you did that, Travis? That's the voice I heard. So I have a motion and a second. Are there any questions about this ordinance? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 18. Reading of an ordinance to revoke an existing 15-foot servitude along the boundary line between tracts B1A and B1B, as well as a 12-foot servitude across tract B1A of the former Arnold Dencos property along Muddy Creek Road. Mr. Parrington.
To revoke an existing 15-foot servitude along the lines between tracts B1A and B1B, as well as a 12-foot servitude across tract B1A of the former Arnold Dencos property along Muddy Creek Road. Property is depicted on the survey map showing the division of tract B1 into tracts B1A and B1B by R.L. Bennett, instrument number 608648, dated May 3rd, 2005. Where the petition has petitioned the Central Parish Council to revoke an existing 15-foot servitude along the boundary line between tract B1A and B1B, as well as a 12-foot servitude along tract B1A of the former Arnold Dencos property along Muddy Creek Road. Property is depicted on a survey map, the division of tract B1 into tracts B1A and B1B of the R.L. Bennett instrument number 608648, dated May 3rd, 2005. And whereas the Planning Department and the Engineering Department have reviewed and researched said request and have no objection to the revocation, the Parish of Ascension hereby ordains that it grants the approval of the revocation of the existing 15-foot servitude along the boundary between tracts B1A and B1B, as well as a 12-foot servitude across tract B1A of the former Arnold Dencos property along Muddy Creek Road. The property is depicted on the survey map, the division of tract B1 into tracts B1A and B1B by R.L. Bennett, instrument number 608648, and dated May 3rd, 2005. Attached to it, made a party rose Exhibit A. All ordinances or reports of ordinances in conflict herewith are henceforth repealed. If any provision of the ordinance is ever held invalid, such invalidity should not affect other provisions herein, which shall give full effect without the invalid provisions. To this end, the provisions of this ordinance are hereby declared severable. The ordinance shall be effective 15 days after adoption. The ordinance has been submitted to a vote. The vote thereon was as follows.
Motion.
A motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
I have a second, a motion by Councilman Todd Lambert and a second by Councilman Aaron Lawler to open the public hearing.
Motion to close.
I have a motion by Councilman Aaron Lawler and a second by Councilman John Cagnolotti to close the public hearing. Chair will entertain a motion to move the ordinance. Got a motion by Councilman Cagnolotti, second by Councilman Todd Lambert to move the ordinance. Are there any questions? Any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. This time, the chair will need a roll call vote to enter into executive session. Madam Secretary.
Councilman Joseph.
Yes.
Councilman Dawson.
Yes.
Councilman Turner. Yes. Councilman Satterley.
Yes.
Councilman Dempsey Lambert. Yes. Councilman Kluot.
Yes.
Councilman Lawler.
Yes.
Councilman Todd Lambert.
Yes.
Councilman Cagnolotti.
Yes.
Chairman Casso.
Yes.
get you up here and put the money in the machines.
And it's just here for Aaron, moving stuff. Keep going in the field, regular here.
Look, I look fat, I don't like it. My wife hates it.
So we'll need a motion to reconvene here, gentlemen.
We gotta wait for the camera.
Okay.
He said go.
Motion to reconvene,
I
Madam
have a
Chairman.
motion by Councilman Todd Lambert and a second by Councilman Cagnolati to reconvene.
Chairwoman,
Item number 21.
I'd like to make a motion that we enter into a sponsorship with ATM Worldwide.
Right, for ATM
With-
machines at Lamar Dixon as a result, and then the case will be resolved that way. We can settle the case that way.
Yeah, motion what he said.
There you go. Motion is O'Neill said, second by Mr. Satterley. Are there any questions? Yeah, are there any objections? Hearing none, that motion passes. Item number 22. We have a motion to adjourn. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We look forward to our next meeting.